Story 1. Becoming disabled can happen to anyone. It does not matter how healthy you have been or what you eat. Story 2. Migraines. People who do not get migraines think it is just a headache that will go away with a couple of acetaminophen tablets, but it is actually debilitating. Story 3. Hopelessness and depression to the point where suicide seems like bliss. I have experienced this several times and have attempted suicide twice. It is a terrible feeling. Words of encouragement can seem invalidating. Nothing brings joy, and there is a constant struggle to maintain a logical approach while battling emotional lows that eventually turn numb. Story 4. Homelessness means there are people without family or loved ones to welcome them to a warm home or help them in times of need. It is hard to be completely independent, truly independent. Story 5. Having to deal with someone who has a full-blown personality disorder, usually psychopathy or narcissistic personality disorder. Story 6. Losing a child in the neonatal intensive care unit and coworkers thinking it is rude when you avoid being around their newborns. Story 7. Betrayal and everyone telling you to let it go. The pain of realizing everyone is protecting the wrongdoers while turning a blind eye to the victims. Story 8. Losing a parent while young, being forced into homelessness, and clawing your way out only to live paycheck to paycheck with 10 years of your life gone. Story 9. Gout is excruciating, debilitating, and constant. There is no working through it. Pain pills will not help. Only prescription medications targeted toward gout can slowly provide relief, but if you do not get the medications in time, they will not be effective for days or even weeks. I do not wish it on my worst enemy. Story 10. Intrauterine device replacement or initial insertion. Medical professionals are convinced that the procedure can be done with the patient fully conscious, taking acetaminophen 1 to 2 hours before the appointment, and returning to work the same day. Story 11. Becoming chronically sick, disabled, or going through a life-threatening illness changes the way you see the world and life. You become hyper-aware of how fragile and fleeting life as you know it can be. Story 12. Having an emergency room doctor say to his nurse that I was a junkie because I had been there twice that week begging for pain management for a bullet-sized kidney stone hurt worse. I was working 2 jobs, had no insurance, and a wealthy person suggested I was a junkie. I couldn't afford a $5,000 laser procedure to break it up to pass it. That was 20 years ago, and I still despise wealthy people, only worse now. I never was and still am not a junkie. Story 13. That depression that eats away at your soul. People think it is just sadness, but I would take physical pain or sadness over that phase of life again. Story 14. Stillbirth. My wife and I are both experienced registered nurses, so now we can joke about it, but we were not prepared at all. Our child was born on my half-birthday, and she looked so much like me. That pain stings like nothing else. Story 15. Having a large secondary cancer growth feeding off your intestines and pushing everything out of the way to grow bigger every day. Story 16. Are we talking physical or mental? Because being left at the hospital with your new baby by your husband is top tier in the emotional failure category. Story 17. Shingles. Get ready for 3 weeks with no sleep, constant pain, and irritation. There is physically no way to position yourself to minimize the discomfort. I got it when I was 28 at a time when I was under a lot of stress, and it was a rough experience with the condition. I am not sure if the new vaccine works, but at the time, the only option was to work through it. Story 18. For me, it is about losing someone who is still alive but no longer the same person to you. I feel that this kind of grief does not come with a funeral, but it hurts just as deeply. Story 19. Having to regularly reassure my 78-year-old mother, a United States green card holder for 50 years, that she will not be kidnapped off the street, but not being so sure of it myself. Story 20. Tinnitus is just awful. It does not stop or change. It is torture. Silence basically does not exist for me anymore. Read the comments on a white noise YouTube video or visit the tinnitus community on Reddit. It is very difficult to cope with. Story 21. When you are being sexually assaulted and realize you have to let them do it so they do not kill you. Also, pancreatitis made childbirth seem like a piece of cake. Story 22. Physical. An abscessed tooth. I always knew they were painful, but actually experiencing it was something else. I have an extremely high pain tolerance. The pain I was in was crippling to the point I was having trouble forming coherent thoughts. All I wanted was to rip it out of my head. At one point, in my desperation, I contemplated jumping in front of a car. They gave me a large amount of lidocaine until they could pull it. The relief made me woozy. Mental, losing a child. I have lost many people I considered dear, and I am no stranger to grief. But losing my infant son was like someone had scooped every part of who I was out of my soul with a melon baller, then shoved it back in as if trying to put a can of biscuits back in the tube. It has been 4 years. I am still alive, and for most intents and purposes, I am functional and mostly happy with life. But every once in a while, it hits me like a freight train and I can't breathe. I will never be who I was before. Story 23. Schizophrenia. No one truly understands what it is like for your mind to attack you constantly until they experience it themselves. Story 24. Having your parents get old and start forgetting things. You think you are prepared for it, but watching someone who taught you everything slowly lose pieces of themselves is brutal. There is nothing you can do to fix it. The role reversal feels different when you are suddenly the one making decisions for them. Story 25. Period pain. Men do not experience it, obviously, but not all women have excruciating pain. Mine is debilitating enough that I am bedridden for a day every month. A friend of mine admitted that she always thought I was being dramatic and seeking attention. She recently had a painful period and called to apologize. Story 26. Death of someone you loved or someone who loved you in return in a healthy way, whether human or pet. Sometimes that understanding comes too early in life, sometimes quite late. Either way, for most of us, it changes you and how you look at your life and the lives of others forever. Story 27. Physical. In the moment, childbirth is painful, but it is a pain you forget quickly. As soon as it is over, you cannot really explain it when you think back. Mental. I would say having to go no contact with parents. There are days when you miss them and just want them to text, but you realize that what you want is a fantasy, not the reality of who they are. As a child, you think your parents are superheroes, but realizing they are the villains is a hard truth to accept. Story 28. Friend breakups take a toll and can cause a chain reaction in group dynamics. Story 29. Going a different route, mental illness because of a job or sleep deprivation. Not sleeping is not something to mess with. You can take the smartest, kindest person, and if you make them not sleep for honestly not that long of a period, you will see how much they deteriorate. If you make that years, it is a train wreck. Story 30. First heartbreak. I used to not understand why people were so extremely upset for literal months or even years after a breakup. I now completely understand why, and it is honestly the worst thing I have ever felt. It is taking me forever to move on. Story 31. Losing your first dog. My childhood dog was my best friend in the entire universe. I went everywhere with her and did everything together. I had to bury her. I miss her all the time. I have never felt any connection like that with another dog again. Story 32. Losing a loved one, missing them, and then forgetting how hard the grief hits you. When it happens again, you instantly remember how hard the grief hits and wonder how you forgot that in the first place. Story 33. Migraine. As guys, we laughed about it in middle school, referring to it as only for girls. This past December and part of January, I had migraines on and off. It felt like the right side of my head was going to split open at any second. Story 34. Severe migraines. People who don't get them always say, "Oh, they're just bad headaches. Do this and that to help them." No, they're not just headaches. They are extremely debilitating and require me to sleep in a dark room for days with no noise or light. More often than not, they require a trip to the emergency room for intravenous opioid painkillers and anti-nausea medication to prevent vomiting or passing out from the pain. Story 35. Physical. Intrauterine device. The pain I felt while getting it was exactly like the contractions I had when I went into labor. Never again. Mental. Losing a parent. I lost my mother over a year ago and she was only 69. She called and texted me every day. It was very hard to get used to not having that after she died. I do not think I will ever delete her text messages or voicemails. Story 36. Fibromyalgia, nerve pain, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and traumatic grief all at the exact same time. Great painful combination. Story 37. Migraine. It is more than a headache. It is a whole experience that includes a headache. Story 38. Becoming disabled and also experiencing the loss of your mother, father, and younger brother within 9 months. Then another younger brother commits suicide a year later. Family matters life. Story 39. Bilateral facial pain from trigeminal neuralgia. I have seriously considered tearing an eye out or my face off. It is crazy pain. I wish it were not on my face. Anywhere else would be so much better. It feels like hot stabbing, shocking, and pulling with hot tingling randomly all over my face and scalp, at about a 6 to 7 out of 10 in severity until I go into a flare-up reaching 10. I have hope for new treatment soon that will finally be covered by insurance. Story 40. My father fought cancer for more than a year and was in remission. He was going to come and watch a football game but did not show up and was not answering his phone. I went to his house and found him dead. Doctors said it was a heart attack. That was about 5 years ago. I have completely lost the ability to recall time. Story 41. Back pain. The only person I have ever met who understood that some days I cannot lift things due to pain was my old manager. He was involved in the Marines and told me he had to have a couple of discs fused together. Everyone else says, "Hey, I know your back is bad, but can you lift this?" Story 42. Grief from losing a loved one. The pain never ends. It just softens a bit over the years and becomes a part of your DNA, a permanent hole in you that never goes away. You will laugh again and have joy again, but it will not be the same as before. Story 43. Gout. I have had it multiple times, and it is agonizing. They say it is the closest thing a man can experience to giving birth, with kidney stones being a close second. It rates 10 out of 10 on the pain scale. Even a bedsheet on your foot or a draft in a room can bring you to tears. Story 44. Losing the person you thought you'd spend your life with. There is no preparation for that kind of pain. I lost my girlfriend when we were both 28. We had plans, marriage, children, a whole future we were building together, and she had just earned her Doctor of Philosophy degree. We never fought, we communicated effortlessly, and we were in sync in every part of life. She was my best friend, my partner, my peace. The initial loss was devastating, but the real weight came later. What it does to your soul, to your sense of who you are, is something no one warns you about. You keep functioning, you look fine, but deep down you are not. You have changed. I would not wish this on anyone, but I know others have felt it too. And if you have, you are not alone. Story 45. Severe burns. I sustained second-degree burns on about 10% of my body from boiling water while cooking. It was unreal. On the drive to the hospital, my husband said I was literally hitting myself in the head violently to distract from the pain. I remember very little of that night. Then came the showers. I had to shower twice a day, rub the dead skin off with a bandage, and then rebandage what was basically my entire lower half. My husband and my mother were amazing. I couldn't help but scream and swear during showering and cleaning the burns, and I literally could not wrap myself in the bandages. Once I started to heal, I developed staphylococcus infection and nearly became septic. I am an incredibly active person, and being bedridden that month was psychologically challenging. I have a friend who suffered worse burns on more of his body a few years earlier due to a wind-ignited propane flame. I cannot imagine. On a positive note, it made me much less nervous about giving birth when the time came a few years later. Story 46. I have had 2 of my cousins murdered around my age. One case has been solved, the other has not, but the pain is the same. One was in the wrong place at the wrong time and was just 26 years old. He was going to school to become a nurse and left behind 2 very young children. The youngest had just turned 1 year old. You never truly move on from something like that. It will always haunt you. Story 47. Being gaslit genuinely feels terrible. Nothing is worse than being unable to trust your own reality because someone else has made you question your own mind. Story 48. I have a constant worry. I hate that it occupies my mind. Losing my love, my husband. We have been married for 56 years. Story 49. One of my sisters asked me when we were younger what a headache feels like. I had headaches multiple times a week. I wanted to cry. Losing a spouse is truly terrible. Being the surviving spouse means being stuck for who knows how long, while intense grief strikes unexpectedly. Then you find yourself back at square one. Story 50. Addiction. Feeling like you are not in control of your life and that you have missed out on so much. Haunted by your own squandered potential every day as you continue to witness yourself sabotage yourself as if something else is running the show and you are just along for the ride. The difficult ride. Story 51. Grief of losing a partner or child suddenly is profound. Loss of a beloved dog, coworker, or going through a divorce may be painful or different, but do not compare them. It is disrespectful to the person who is grieving. Story 52. Real migraine. When people complain about a migraine but are still walking, talking, and driving, that is just a minor headache. Story 53. Hallucinations. People find it easy to throw around the word crazy at others, but when it is you sitting in your living room, hearing whispers coming from the next room, hearing loved ones, friends, and family say they want you dead and are going to kill you while you sleep, imagine being terrified for your life while people call you crazy. Not being able to trust yourself or anyone around you is a whole other type of hopeless. Story 54. Losing both your maternal grandparents and your brother in 2 years when you were 9 to 11. Then your mother and other grandmother in the same year at 30. My children wonder why I am always telling them about safety and things to do or not do to protect them. I knew way too much about death from an early age. Story 55. Untreated neuropathy is very painful. It is impossible to sleep, and you end up lying awake hoping you just die or that someone would cut your feet or legs off at the very least. Anything to make it stop. Story 56. Losing a child. My son passed almost 4 years ago, on July 3rd. I still feel it like it was today. You do not want to be here anymore, but if you have another child, which I do, you have to be. They both had leukemia, and they both had to have a bone marrow transplant. He, age 29, developed graft versus host disease in his lungs. She is cured and is currently 29. It is a mental, emotional, spiritual, and sometimes physical pain that you learn to live with every day. No, time does not make it better. No, time does not make it easier. It just becomes different. You still laugh, but not the same. You still get up and do and go, just not the same. There is a light in you still because of the other child, but not as bright. To be honest, it is hell. Those mothers who know, they just know. Story 57. The constant anxiety and mental exhaustion that comes with being stalked are difficult to understand. People do not realize that stalking can be much more complex than repeated unwanted contact. Every situation is different, but there can be a strong element of sadism behind it. The resulting hypervigilance is not something you can simply turn off. Personally, I feel safer and more at ease when I am somewhere unfamiliar halfway across the country than I do in my own home. I also sleep better because I know the likelihood of him getting to me is much lower. Story 58. The pain of losing both a physical and emotional connection with a special person happens when you fall in love, but cannot be together due to external circumstances. This triggers intense pain and reflection because this person activated something in you that you do not understand at first, only to realize that they came into your life to heal wounds that never healed. Not everyone goes through a spiritual awakening. It is incredibly hard and painful, yet enlightening at the same time. You lose the old version of yourself to become your true self, who you are really meant to be. Story 59. How has no one mentioned childbirth or running a marathon? Yes, we talk about those being painful, but experiencing them is indescribable. Story 60. Kidney stone. Being betrayed by people you considered good friends or family causes emotional pain as real as physical pain. Story 61. Physically, fibromyalgia. Mentally, discovering that you have suppressed memories and were lied to all your life, then feeling like you live with complete strangers. Story 62, kidney stones. Not passing them, but when they get stuck in your ureter and consequently your kidney fills up with fluid. That pain is hard to describe. It is all-encompassing and always present. There is no way to ignore it, no position that is comfortable, and no medication available without a doctor that will help. Morphine and ketorolac intravenously, and then I will be at least able to converse with you like a normal person. Story 63, War. I remember playing war when I was a kid, running through the forest yelling, "I got you!" Then I joined the United States Army and went to the Gulf War. There was no question. There was no coming back the same. War will mess you up. If it did not, you were broken before you went. My own quote. Horrifying. Story 64. Physical, hearing loss, which is even worse when some people regard it as a joking matter. Mental, family estrangement. Story 65. Tarantula hawk sting. I have experienced serious physical trauma in my life, but I always remember the tarantula hawk that stung me when I was young. I was in the fetal position, screaming for 5 minutes straight. Story 66. 3 things. 1. Never having been loved. 2. Organizational abuse. 3. Finding out that everything your assumed partner told you was a lie, such as in cases of conman marriage or relationships with undercover police spying on activists. People usually say death of a child, and I am skeptical of that expression. I have also seen different parents react very differently to that. Story 67. Mental health of a loved one. I remember my grandfather with his great sense of humor and enthusiasm to learn. Then he became a shell of a man, on psychiatric medications to stay calm. One time I walked into the room, and he told someone his son had walked in. He described me, then told the person he was talking to that he understood they could not see me. It made me wonder who was real and who was make-believe. Story 68. Being so lonely despite being in the same room as your spouse that you would consider moving back home to live in your parents' basement, where you slowly dissolve into the dusty shag carpet. Story 69. Mental and emotional. Growing up with your best friend on the same street as you slowly discover over time that she was constantly playing defense against you and did not want anyone else to like you. There are so many terrible things I could write a book about, from first grade until graduation. As a kid, you are just confused and do not understand the gaslighting. Story 70. Anything chronic. Acute pain, even for a few days, can be horrible. I would never wish that on anyone. But chronic pain leads to mental health issues, compensation with other things, addiction, and depression. I drank more when my back was at its worst, and that was relatively minor, just ever present. Story 71. Dental abscess. There is something about dental pain. It feels like an electric shock traveling up the nerve to your brain. Story 72. Chronic pain. I am not allowed to show it because it is depressing for other people. It is relentless. I am so tired. Story 73. A severe gout attack can be very painful. While it often affects the big toe, the pain can be intense and overwhelming. Story 74. Ruptured discs, a frozen shoulder, and recovering from spinal fusion surgery. Losing a beloved family member, living through a terrorist attack or mass shooting, and being involved in a severe car accident where you have to be cut out of the vehicle. Story 75. Dry socket after having a tooth pulled is literally the worst, most crippling pain I have experienced. Oxycodone did nothing and just made me drowsy. Nothing I did could dull the pain enough to sleep, so I ended up a bit hysterical after a few days. The dentist got me in to put clove packing into the empty socket. My partner said they could hear me screaming from the reception area. The instant relief once the packing was fully in and settled was better than any medication I could imagine. My mother had dry socket once, and she has always said she would rather give birth 10 times without medication than deal with that kind of pain again. Story 76. All of them. People simply lack the imagination of what it is like to be someone else and experience their circumstances. Story 77. Hunger is not just a can of beans, not just a can of cream of mushroom soup, and not your rent money that you can spend now and figure out later. You are 12 cents short for a can of off-brand little sausages that costs 50 cents, on sale for 25 cents. Story 78. surviving a coma and no one understanding the long-term effects, and not being able to verbalize it because it seems like you are asking for sympathy. Story 79. Living through something so traumatic and complex that no one understands because they are traumatized, avoidant, or abusive. Your improvement feels like a threat. Your pain reminds them of their own. Nothing is ever good enough, and people misunderstand your composure as having moved on. I am not okay. Story 80. All the difficulties my husband has been dealing with. I can't understand the amount of pain he is in. Some days he cannot sleep with a simple sheet over him because it hurts when it touches his skin. He takes it off and then the wind from the ceiling fan hurts his skin. It is horrible. Story 81. Cracking your tailbone in a fall causes a cold, shivery feeling that spreads through your internal organs, not just your back. Your entire body reacts with, "Oh, that was bad." Story 82. Corneal ulcer pain is horrible. I had them once in both eyes at an advanced stage due to being a long-time contact lens wearer. I woke up one morning with my eyes swollen and red and thought it was just a bad case of conjunctivitis until I walked outside. The pain caused by the sunlight took my breath away. I remember my doctor telling me that if I had waited much longer to be seen, I probably would have lost my vision. I stopped wearing contact lenses and switched to glasses after that. Story 83. Getting bullied as a child and losing your favorite parent at the same time are especially difficult experiences. Story 84. Nerve pain. I had shingles, and it felt like 1,000 mosquitoes were biting me, but their venom was made of electricity. It was unbearable. Spinal headaches. My cerebrospinal fluid leaked from an epidural, and I did not have enough fluid to support my brain. It was also completely unbearable. Story 85. The pain of feeling like you are never enough, even when all people do is praise you. I try so hard to rid myself of this feeling, but I cannot. Story 86. Cancer. I cannot describe the mental and physical toll it takes on me or how much it has changed me. Story 87. I would say interstitial cystitis. It feels like a urinary tract infection that just does not end, at least not for me. It is hell, and I would not wish it on anyone. Story 88. Being born to parents who have both narcissistic personality disorder and bipolar disorder is difficult. It is hard not to be like them sometimes. It makes me sad. Story 89. Going blind. I have been blind for close to 12 years now. It declines slowly at first. It is terrible not being able to see my loved ones or do simple activities like riding a bike or playing basketball in the driveway, which I have not done in so long. Story 90. Oddly specific to women only, pain associated with female diseases such as adenomyosis and endometriosis. Women without uterine pain tend to downplay other women's illness pain and often make fun of them. It is unfortunate. Story 91. Losing a loved one to suicide or overdose is difficult. I lost my brother 13 years ago to suicide. Not a day goes by that I don't think of him constantly. To the outside world, I appear completely normal, and it seems like it doesn't affect me much anymore. If they only knew. I have learned to carry the grief with me as part of my daily routine. Story 92. Losing my partner's best friend was very painful. Holding his hand all night and comforting him as he took his last breath was incredibly difficult. 10 times worse than that was calling my partner to say he was gone. The howl of grief he let out is something I will feel in the pit of my stomach every time I remember it. Story 93. Substance abuse affects those who truly want to stop but cannot. They already hate themselves for relapsing, and everyone responds with yelling and threats. I am a recovering alcoholic. Not once did anyone try to help me with kindness. Instead, they screamed at me and called me useless and worthless. I was a quiet, depressed person drinking away my suicidal thoughts in misery and alone. I was not causing chaos. Each interaction pushed me further toward wanting to die, which is why I began drinking in the first place. I am now sober, after years of therapy. I am happy these days, but there were many very dark decades. Story 94. The grief of losing someone who was very close to you is profound. My husband died of a massive heart attack after 50 years of marriage. It was so unexpected. He was only 71 years old. I still miss him every day. Story 95. Cramps from a woman's monthly cycle are just not acceptable. For it to be a monthly occurrence should be illegal, or we should be compensated. Story 96. Real depression is not just situational for a few months or a year after a breakup. It is real, overwhelming joy and life-sucking. You cannot give anything to anyone, knowing you are letting everyone down, feeling like a bad mother, and unable to even make dinner. The utter grayness, the inability to do anything yet see it all pass before you while missing it, knowing you need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, but cannot. This is chemical messed up in the brain. Nobody can help you. Depression. Story 97. When you have been wronged and no one believes you, telling the truth about something crazy that someone did to you may sound unbelievable. Story 98. Total loneliness. Going through your life without finding a single person who can relate to you. It is not terrible but can be isolating at times. When you want to connect as a social being but lack the ability to connect with those who cannot relate to you. I spend a lot of time in nature. I can understand trees better than most people. Story 99. Watching someone you love completely change and ruin their life due to drugs is very painful. It is hard to see them become someone you do not recognize, and nothing you do helps. Story 100. Having your children taken away from you because your former spouse moved across the country and does not allow you to see them. Story 101. I lost my house to a brush fire when I was 16 while I was babysitting. Everyone got out safely, but I still hate anything related to fire, including fireworks. Story 102. Having to put your old dog down when you know that keeping him alive is selfish and his quality of life will not sustain him anyway. That was the first time I had seen my dad cry in years. My whole family took him to the veterinarian, and we cried for days afterward. That pain is still so raw sometimes. Story 103. Raising a puppy, training and living with it for 16 years as it becomes man's best friend. Those who have never had a dog as a long-term pet do not understand the emotional loss when it passes. I have lost 2 dogs who lived to be 14 and 16 years old and cried like a baby when they passed. Some so-called friends said it was just a dog and told me to get over it. I am no longer friends with a few of them, and the others got dogs and now understand. Story 104. Miscarriage. I knew it would be upsetting, but I did not realize how upsetting. I am legitimately traumatized and might have post-traumatic stress disorder. Story 105. Becoming homeless and having to give up your pet because of higher right making a mistake on your background check. Story 106. I don't think a person realizes how much they can be attached to another human being until they lose someone special and can't get over it for a lifetime. Story 107. Being trapped in an abusive relationship. You think to yourself, why not just leave the relationship? But sometimes things do not become abusive until everything is so intertwined that leaving becomes almost impossible. Children, finances, housing, work, friends, family. All of this can get tangled together. To top it off, there is the emotional aspect. Who wants to commit to another multi-decade relationship after attempting to make it work for so long? Story 108. A migraine so severe that it causes temporary blindness and vomiting, which in turn makes the migraine much more painful. Story 109. Getting your knee drained. It seems harmless until you feel the needle scraping the underside of your kneecap. Then comes the intense suctioning of the fluid, which by vacuum pulls everything a little closer, followed by the relief as the first syringe is filled and removed. Then the doctor goes back for round 2. I have broken bones, cracked ribs, torn muscles, all child's play compared to this. It is the closest I have ever been to passing out from pain. Story 110. Losing a loved one suddenly is difficult. A month ago, my sibling called me, screaming that my father was dead, lying on the bathroom floor. I had never experienced the shock and grief before. It affects your body in ways you cannot control. Story 111. Migraine is not a headache. It is and can be debilitating. There is a whole online community dedicated to this topic because it can be life-ruining. Also, hip pain is very difficult to endure. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.